Hey everybody, welcome back to GR Research, where today we're doing something a little different. We're looking at a bunch of mini monitors, and when I say mini monitors, I'm talking little mini monitors. These are more of your budget product lines, I guess you could say. And I had so many of them in here all at once, I thought I should shoot a video on these things and just look at what these companies are producing and what you get for your money. And then there's a few of them that I'm going to see what I can do with and see if I can really upgrade these things quite a bit. Now, interesting lineup here. Starting way over here on my left, what is this little thing? Oh, the Polk TM15, I think it's called. Let me look at this little sucker. T15, sorry, T15 by Polk. Here we have the popular little Pioneer speaker. Let me look at the notes here on these things. The Pioneer is the SP BS22. Here we have a little more expensive British speaker from Proac, the Tablet 50, and then over here to my right, and I hope I'm saying this correct, the Neumi BS5, another very inexpensive mini monitor. And several of these you can buy on Amazon and various places online. And some of these are not much money. The little I'm drawing a blank on these names. The Polk over here on my left and the little Neumi on my right here are both $99 a pair. $99 a pair. I can't believe they can make them and sell them retail for $99 a pair. So what that means is they had to build this entire pair of speakers for about $20 to $25. And I don't know how you build the whole speaker for you know, they're basically $12, $15 a piece is all they can spend on building the whole thing. And that has to include the boxing and everything. So I don't know how they do that. So what do you get for that kind of money? Well, over here, the little, doing it again. Over here, the little Polk speaker, I have a tough time with that one today, gives you a little 5 1/4 or 5-inch woofer, stamped steel frame, shielded for some reason. And the tweeter, which has a tiny neodymium magnet on it, next to nothing, a little lightweight fabric dome, looks like 5/8 inch dome. The Pioneer has the smallest woofer of the bunch, and actually probably the largest box. It's a little 4-inch driver, got a nice little motor structure on it. Again, stamped steel frame. Nice looking tweeter though. I look at this tweeter and I think, this tweeter reminds me of the tweeters I see in the ELAC models. Wonder if there's a connection there. Then we got the Proac, which uses a little 5-inch woofer. Also, this one is a cast frame. Yeah, and nice little tweeter. Again, tiny little tweeter, maybe a 5/8 inch diameter tweeter. And then over here, the Neumi, I guess it is. Again, a little stamped steel frame woofer, very inexpensively made, and a cute little tweeter, a little neodymium motor tweeter with some cooling fins on the back. I don't know how much heat's really going to be pulled off by those, but an interesting looking little tweeter. All the boxes are about the same thickness. This one has been lined with something. The Proac has been lined with something. I don't know if that's from the factory. I think the customer may have done that. All of them are ported, I think. And this one is ported out the front. The Proac is ported in the rear with 2 ports. Pioneer's ported in the rear, and the Polk is ported in the front. Crossover parts. Let's look at the Polk over here. The Polk crossover is the cheesiest of the group. Tiny iron core inductor and 1 electrolytic cap. First order, that's it. Steel screws on the binding post cup, so cheap as you can get, really. The Pioneer speaker, of course, at the price points that these are at, is what you expect. This one's $199 a pair. All the little cheap parts, at least on the tweeter circuit, it does have a little air core inductor and a poly cap. But little electrolytic cap, sandcast resistor, and a little iron core inductor on the woofer circuit. Pretty cheesy. The Neumi over here, also exactly what you'd expect. Steel screws, iron core inductor, all electrolytic cap, all sandcast resistors. There's one little air core inductor on the tweeter circuit, but pretty much your really inexpensive stuff there. How about the Proac? The Proac, by the way, I think I saw some retail on it at $550. And this was back when it came out in the mid 80s. I've seen prices as high as $1,700, but it may be a newer version of this model. And for that higher price tag, you get not much. Not much. You get tiny little tiny little iron core inductors. There's an electrolytic cap. These are some really small polyester film caps and some little sandcast resistors, and the circuit board is in aluminum. At least on this one, it was the only one of the bunch that the wiring was soldered directly to the drivers. All the rest had push-on connectors. And so across the board, about the same parts quality in all of these. Now let's look at how they measured. What do we have here? Let's start with the little Polk speaker over here at the end. Let's throw up the frequency response of this thing and look at it. That's a bit of a mess. If you look, there's a huge hole in the response. And as soon as I shot it, and I heard it when I shot it, I thought, well, that didn't sound right. You could tell the drivers are out of phase, and that's what's causing that huge suck out right there in the response. The drivers are out of phase. So I thought, well, somebody's been into it. They swapped some wires. Something's gone on there. Let's go back and let's examine it. I took it apart, and all the factory wiring was correct. Everything was connected with the larger terminals on the positives and the smaller push-on connector there on the negatives. So all of that was done from the factory. I don't see anything that's been changed or tampered with. So I took some little clip leads and flipped the polarity on the tweeter, and here was the result. Well, if you look at the green line now, you'll see at least the drivers are in phase. There's still a huge hump in the response at about 2K. That's pretty much a disaster. Once I had that done to where it looked okay, I took a spectral decay, and you can see there's quite a bit of stored energy there in the woofer's response at the upper end of its range. So that little speaker was a bit of a disaster, I would say. I don't know what the people at Polk are thinking. And I've seen some nice work from that company, but this wasn't it. And this was all the damping material that there was thrown in. So there you go on that one. The other $99 one here. Let's look at this little job here from Neumi, I guess you call it. If you look at the on-axis frequency response, at first it looks really flat. You think, man, that's pretty smooth, other than a couple of three little humps there. And the three little humps, if you look at the spectral decay, you'll see those three little humps are quite nasty. There's a lot of stored energy going on right there. And I suspected right away that it could be from the ports that are on the front of this thing. The port output is causing some of these issues that we see right here. So I took some foam and I plugged the ports. Now here's the frequency response measurement with the ports open, and then another response overlaid there with the ports plugged. And as you can see with the ports plugged, it made a much smoother response. There's still a little bit of a hump there at about 1200 hertz or so, but it's much smoother. If you look at the spectral decay, you'll see the spectral decay is much cleaner, much cleaner compared to what it was before. So if I designed something new for this one, I could probably do something to get that little hump out, and this one would produce a pretty smooth response. Looking at the off-axis responses, the vertical off-axis looks great. That means as you move up and down vertically, it looks great. A lot of that has to do with the fact that it uses this really small diameter faceplate tweeter, and the acoustic centers are really close. So these things are mounted just right on each other. So we're not spacing the drivers too far apart. And so as you move up and down, you're not causing a big time delay in one versus the other compared to speakers that have the driver space further apart. So in that regard, pretty good. Off axis horizontally, it looked okay too. Looked pretty good. The impedance also looked nice and smooth. You know, this may be a good candidate to do something with. I'm gonna see what I can do with it and see if I can straighten that thing out. Let's look at the little Pioneer speaker here. The little Pioneer speaker, on axis frequency response, really smooth. This one, I measured it also with the grill on it, and the grill really caused some disruptions in the response. But other than that, pretty good. The horizontal off axis drops off normally, looks good. Vertical off axis also looks pretty good. It's starting to drop off at the crossover point, which looks like it's around 3K. A little bit in the vertical, but not bad. The spectral decay on this thing is really clean. If you look at that, you see a few little traces there, but not much. Really clean, so not a lot of ringing or nothing there that's going to really agitate you. The only thing I didn't like about the design was the impedance was real mismatched. The upper frequency range had a really high impedance load versus the lower frequency range, so that was a little off. But other than that, pretty well designed compared to some of the others. So there's no real problems other than your amplifier is going to see a little unbalanced load, but for a lot of amps that's no big deal. It compared really well with the rest of these. The biggest drawback I could see was the smallest of the group in the woofers. The little 4-inch woofer is going to limit what it can do as far as low-end extension and things like that. Now let's look at the most expensive, the little Proac. And if we look at it, its on-axis frequency response is not bad. I mean, it's fairly smooth. There's a little bit of roughness there in the woofer's response. And if you look at the crossover response, you'll see what I'm talking about. You can see that roughness there is right there in the woofer's range, whereas the tweeter's range is pretty smooth. If you look at horizontal off-axis, there's actually a pretty good peak that develops in the horizontal off-axis right around 4K. There's a hot spot there. And then as you move vertically off-axis, because the crossover is so high in frequency, we start to see a little dropout in the vertical off-axis. And the spectral decay on it is fairly smooth. Nothing bad's going on there. There's a little bit of energy there on the woofer around that I guess 700 to 800 mark. But overall pretty clean, and the impedance looks pretty good. So all in all, some of these have some strong points. Some of them have some weak points. They're all not perfect by any means. I don't know that it's worth doing much to the little Pioneer. It's going to be held back by the size of the woofer. But other than that, we could definitely design something that would bring the resolution and detail levels up another notch. The Polk needs a lot of help. This was the biggest disaster of all of them. It needed to have been thrown back at the engineers and said, what are you thinking? I've even had one of the customers that own these say they were trying to measure the rim response with the Odyssey, and it kept showing that one of the speakers was out of phase no matter which way they flip the polarity, and that's because the drivers are out of phase from each other. It's just messed up, and I've not seen a speaker with a frequency response more messed up than that speaker. The Proac, definitely a good candidate for a little help. I'll see what I can do with this response, and we'll get rid of this garbage here and put some good quality parts in there, and it might not be too bad. At least the terminals on this was the only one that didn't have steel nuts on it. At least it had brass parts or nickel parts or something on it, but it didn't have steel screws. Every other model here had steel screws. The little Neumi over here, I'm going to see what I can do with it, and I mean, expect the same across the board. It's going to be a couple $100 to $300 for good quality parts with any of these, and it's going to vary a little depending on how many parts are needed for each model. And you have to think, is it worth it? to spend more money on something that doesn't cost much to begin with. But then in the end, we may be able to take something like this that you had $99 in, or something like even with the Polk with $99 in, and for $300 you may wind up with a really good speaker, even a lot better than the Proac. And with a little money spent on the Proac, you may actually have a pretty good sounding little speaker. So I'm going to see what I can do with some of these. Some of these, like the Pioneer, I don't know that I will do anything with it. We'll see. And I'll do a complete video on these as I do the upgrades on it. We'll go through the before and afters and all that stuff. But I wanted to just do a run through on these and give you guys an idea of kind of what's inside these things and what to expect. Sometimes as you go up in price, it doesn't necessarily mean you're really going up in quality or performance. So keep that in mind. Always look under the hood, see what's inside, not just on the outside of the speaker if at all possible. That'll tell you more than what's on the outside sometimes. That's it for this video, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys on the next video.